We'll go with what we have for now. Okay, welcome everyone to the first virtual SI. Yeah, so it's going to be the first one for the semester, and we're going to be probably doing this every other second week. We'll pretty much for the agenda today. We're gonna have the logistics. Then we're gonna go over creating a class, and then going over what a good Java doc is, and data types and operators. So what you pretty much covered in class just recently on Thursday. Do you have anything to add, Yen? Or
so that is all. So every time you sign in, you will get 2 points like you do in person. So I will post the link to sign in right now, and please go to that link and sign in.
So for virtual SI sessions, we'll just go over the logistics real quick because I mean this is the first time, and not everyone is sure of how it goes. So we'll go over it right now. The first thing is we do mute on entry, so you guys aren't really going to be using your voice or your webcams because privacy reasons. It's for your own sake, and it's pretty much you guys are just going to communicate through the chat. Yeah, it'll be quiet for the most part because it's just going to be me and Yen talking, but that's fine. Just try to be active at the chat at least. Do you want me to go over everything, or do you want to take turns, Yen?
So for every time when we have an activity, most of the talking will be us. But when we ask questions to each other, we also want you to answer that in the chat. So this will be like a podcast kind of style, but the more you answer on the chat, the better you learn.
As for the videos, we're going to be pretty much recording every single virtual SI. They do take some time, so don't expect it to be posted the night after. I'm pretty busy myself, and rendering videos can take a while, and even like getting them processed on YouTube can take a while, depending on how long it is. So please be patient when it comes to the videos, but just know I will post them as soon as I can, just for everyone's sake. You want the next one?
Yeah, I think you can go.
Okay. So for how often we're going to do virtual SI, it's going to be bi-weekly, so that means every other week. So and that's only if we're both available too. So in case if there's an emergency, of course we can't really do it that week, right? And yeah, so for attendance, make sure if you're here today in virtual SI, make sure you go to the Google spreadsheet, ask Yen for it if you can't find it, and then we'll sort it out from there. We'll start it off by writing a class. So do you want to describe this class for us, Yen, or do you want me to do it?
So for the first activity, we want you to write a class. So we're just gonna jump right in. So for this class, you can go ahead and open your BlueJ and call this class fish feeder.
Yeah, so
in this class,
go ahead, sorry.
In this class, as shown in the Google slides, we want 3 instant variables: the fish name, the number of pellets, and the number of count that you feed the fish each day. And we also want a constructor that only takes in the name, but don't take in anything else. So you have to think of a way of how to initialize the pellets and the amount of count. And for the mutator, we want you to calculate the number of pellets that you feed a fish, and also how many times that you feed a fish. So every time you feed a fish, the count will increment. And as for the assessor, we want you to return a string that displays the name of your fish, the number it had eaten, and the number of times that you feed a fish. And as you do your class, go ahead and do Java doc like how you would initialize, how you would write comments for the assessor, like at return or FRM, and description for method and constructor. So as you guys are doing this activity, we will be doing it along with you. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type out your questions in the chat, and we will answer it as we doing the process. So if you guys are ready, we're gonna go ahead and start.
Yeah. So I also recommend that you do at least try it on your own and try to stay ahead of me and Yen if you can. Of course, you might get stuck, and then eventually Yen and I will catch up to you. That's fine. But if you're just sitting there and you're just waiting to see the answer, you're not going to learn as much. So I really, really encourage that you go ahead and try this activity. And if you are confused, ask a question if you can, and rather than just like waiting for me and Yen, right? So okay, let's get started. So whenever you're first starting out a class, the first thing you want to look at is well, actually, what do you think is the first thing to look at? So let's hear your thoughts.
So the first thing I would do is I would write the Java doc for the class. So right here, when they say write a description of your class feeder, instead of that, you would delete that whole line and write a description of how you would execute this class.
Okay, so let's go by how we described it. So this class will, okay, so the first thing is, let's look at what it's supposed to do. So what is it modeling? So it's called fish feeder, right? So it will model a fish that you can feed. Do you think that's enough, Yen?
Yeah, I think that would be okay.
Okay.
It just needs to be general. It doesn't need to be specific.
Yeah. Okay. So then from here, what do you think we should do, Yen?
So after that, we have description of the class. We can go ahead and move on to the first task we have in the slide, which is create the instant variables.
Yeah. So anytime after a class, after I think about what it's supposed to do and I name it, right? So I named it fish feeder. Then I think about, okay, what is everything that it's gonna remember? So in this case, I want it to remember the fish's name. So that's gonna be a type string. So, and I'm gonna call it fish name. It doesn't have to be called fish name, but I think that makes sense.
Mark, I think you forget something.
Oh, what did I forget?
So every time you create an instant variable, you need to classify if it's public or private. So yes.
Exactly. Okay, that's good. And I actually noticed that one of the students in the chat noticed that too. So that's good that you guys are paying attention.
So it is very necessary to classify a private or public, because every time you initialize something, you want to know if it's accessible or not. So here, private would be only accessible to this class.
All right. So I'm gonna take what I just learned, right? And I'm gonna add private before everything that I'm going to initialize here. So, well, not initialize, sorry. Write down, I guess, because initialize is not the right word. Okay, so now I have the pet's name, well, the fish's name. It's not necessarily a pet. And then now I need the amount of pellets eaten and the amount of times I feed the fish. So I could do a double, but is there any better way than that? Yeah, exactly. So someone in the chat mentioned that I should use an int. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Do you guys know why? So so why would you? What do you think, Yen? While they're replying.
What's your question again?
So why is it that we use integer instead of a double for counting how many times we've given pellets, or no, how many pellets they've eaten, and how many times we fed the fish?
Because in this case, we don't need a decimal, so an int type would be better.
Yeah. Yeah. And someone in the chat mentioned that as you explain it, so that's good. Okay, so I'm gonna carry on to the next part. I also noticed there's a question over there in chat, and it says, "What does it create, public or private, when the code is just string fish name?" So, Yen, you can go ahead and answer that as I write down this next part.
In this case, you always have to classify public or private. If not, you will get a compiler error. So for instant variables, you would always want to be private because you want this data to be only belong to this class. But for like the methods, when you create objects in like a tester class, you will want it to be public so that you can access this class, methods from other classes.
So now we're going to move on to the next part, which is the constructor of the class. So this is the part of the class where, let's say if I was using fish feeder tester, right? And normally I would say like, okay, fish feeder my fish equals new, and then I'm going to write something down here. So this part right here that I'm about to write down in this class right here inside this constructor, that's what determines what we write over here for this new statement, right? So I noticed that a lot of students like to, for whatever reason, write void right here. Yen, do you think that's a good idea?
Nope. So for this case, you want a constructor, and a constructor is a different part of the class other than the class. Other than the methods. So in this case, you want the constructor to be public, and then whatever the class name is, which is fish feeder. So void, don't do it. It's for your mutator methods only.
Yeah. So so whenever you're making a constructor for a class, as in you're trying to say new fish feeder something something. Notice that we have to say fish feeder, right? It has to be the same name as its type. So that means over here in this class, I also have to call it fish feeder. I can't call it constructor. I have to call it fish feeder. And then I have to omit this right here, and then just leave it like that. Okay. So do I need any parameters? So that's something to think about, guys. So yeah, what do you think you suggest for students to realize if there should be a parameter or not? So you guys can think about it, but Yen and I are going to talk about it.
So in the instruction, it says it takes only one parameter, and it says in the instruction that it wants the name. For the pellets, so why not the pellets and the number of amount? So in the beginning, you haven't feed your fish any pellets yet, right? And because you didn't feed anything yet, the number of count will always be 0. So those things you don't need to enter in the beginning, but rather you can start from the beginning, so that when you have your methods, you can increment the amount that you feed and the amount of times that you feed a fish.
So I see someone in the chat mentioned that can we use shorts for the data type of pellets eaten or the times the fish was fed? I don't suggest that. Normally for the scope of this class, you really either use int or double. It's pretty much, yeah, that's all you really need to use for the most part when it comes to representing numbers. To you, as far as you know, you just need to look at the number and say, is there a decimal or is there not a decimal? And then that's all you really need to worry about. Shorts, longs, floats, I mean, they're fancy and all, but for the most part, you should just stick to what's basic to this class. You don't need to worry about those too much. So in this case, as Yen suggested, we do want to take in the parameter for the name. So so I can call it the fish name, but I can also call it fish name. To me, I like calling it the same thing as this because really it's just easier. I have to make up less names. I could add the over here, but you know, I can I have to write 3 more letters. Let's say I don't want to write those 3 extra letters, right? So then if I say fish name equals fish name,
So for this one, will it work, guys? If you put fish name equal fish name. So yes, it will not work because in this case, you don't know which fish name are you referring to. Are you referring to the local variable or are you referring to the instant variable? So in this case, how would you avoid doing that, Mark?
So in this case, I would pretty much use this dot. So a lot of people look at this and they're like, whoa, what is this new crazy feature? But it's really like, what it's saying is, when you're saying this, like pretend you're the class, okay? Like pretend you're in the perspective of the class. What does this mean? It means whatever you're holding, right? And whatever you're holding refers to these variables right here, these instance variables. So when you're asking the fish feeder this, like when you're asking them, oh yeah, they're saying, oh, it's this fish name, and they just grab it out of their pocket and they just hand it over, and they're saying like, it's the one that I have right here. So that's what this means. It pretty much gets rid of the ambiguity and stops asking if it's this one or this one, and it just clears it and just says, okay, I actually mean this one. So that's what this means.
So from suggestion, another way you can do is change the local variable name to another name so that you can avoid the ambiguity. But this is another way you can do it by using this reference.
So yeah, and somebody is asking, does the keyword this work when you want to reference another class's object as well? I'll let you explain that while I write something here.
Yes, so every time you create another class, you will create a different object for that class. So every time you have to do like something like referring to an object with a local variable name, then you're referring this equal this blank equal blank. So this would always work for every class, but it would not work in the tester class because in that case, you want to test out, you want to create new objects to test out the methods that you have wrote. So this reference work the best in the classes that you will write.
Okay, so this is the next thing that I see a lot of students do. So they say, okay, there's 3 instance variables, so I'm going to assume that there's 3 parameters and that I set them up like this, right? Like I could just, well, maybe some students like to use that, right? So I'll just do that just to appeal to both audiences. So some students like to do this. Is this a good idea, Yan?
No, for this case, you don't need to pass parameters to these instance variables. And also, in the instruction, it doesn't need 3 parameters. It just only asks for 1. So you can go ahead and remove the second and the third parameter.
Yeah, so in this case, ideally, whenever you get a new fish, you haven't really fed it any pellets yet. And you haven't really fed it yet at all, period, right? So why do we need to even ask the constructor over here if we, like, how many times we fed it? It's always going to be 0. So I might as well start it off as 0. Okay.
Yeah, and notice that we use camel casing. So every time you initialize a local variable or a method or instant variables, you always have to use camel casing. The only time that you don't use camel casing is when you initialize a constant, which is when you want all your name to be capitalized and separate each word with a underscore.
So somebody's asking a deeper explanation on how to camel case. All right, so I'll just do it this once, just to help everyone out. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna write a normal sentence. The fox ate the, or actually, hold on, ate. Actually, it's not even capitalized. The fox ate the rabbit. Okay. So normally we don't use sentences for a variable name, but I just wanted to use this to emphasize a few things. So first of all, Ian, what do you think these spaces are a good idea for a variable name?
And no. So every time so camel casing, and you don't want to have a space between each word, because that would mean you mean like a separate entities. So you don't want that. You want all the names, all the words to be combined together.
Okay.
And every time you have an instant variable, a variable name, the first letter of the first word should be lowercase. So right here, Mar had the first letter T should be a lowercase t. And for every word to the next, you want the first letter to be capitalized. So in this case, the second word is fox. So F will be capitalized. The next word is, what's the next word that you have?
8.
8. So A will be capitalized. And so on until the next word. D, so T, and then R for rabbit.
So notice how hard it was for Yen to see which one's the next word. This is because if everything is in lowercase, it's hard to tell which one's a word of its own versus the next one. And that's because they're all lowercase, right? You can't tell where it begins or ends. So camel casing forces, well, it doesn't force you, right? But like it tells you should start off every single word with an uppercase letter. That way you know it's the next word. And the only reason why we make the first word lowercase is because we make a general naming scheme rule to ourselves and say, okay, all variables start off with a lowercase letter. That way, when we see it, classes start with an uppercase, and variables start off with a lowercase.
So in this case, notice that we don't use space, because if you use space, that will indicate that they are separate. But if you have them all together, the compiler knows that, oh, these names belong for one variable. And also, Mark, can you include a keyword, a special key, or a number in the beginning of the variable name? Will it work?
So let's see. What if I put a 1 right here? Well, I'm getting a compiler error and it's saying there's an identifier expected. So basically, Java's saying, please don't start off with a number. And that's
Yes.
because a lot of things can go wrong because they're not sure if it's a value anymore at that point. Because if you're starting off something with a number, they'll be like, okay, it's some kind of special value. But yeah, just don't start off with a number. Instead of, if you wanted to say 1, you would literally write the name 1, like that, right? But I'm not gonna call it one fish name. That sounds weird.
But you can put the number at the end of the variable name. So
Yeah.
you can
So
put fish name 1.
yeah. So I can say fish name 1.
Yeah.
And
But
it
not
would
the other way around.
compile it. Except over here, can't find some little. I probably made a typo. Oh wait,
And
no,
also, can you put like a hashtag sign before or anywhere in the variable name?
okay. So I'll try over here. So now there's an illegal character for the pound sign. So Java says no, no, no when it comes to symbols as well. So I can't put the @ sign either. Or while I'm at it, even the exclamation mark. So just use plain English, guys.
Yeah. Only plain alphabets and numbers, but no special key. And for number, the restriction is it should be at somewhere after the first letter.
All right.
So that is camel case.
Yeah. So that is camel case. Camel case. Okay. So the next part. Okay, let's see. So we did the constructor, and it says take in the name and make them start at 0 and try to use this. So we did all those parts. Now let's go on to the method.
So there's one question regarding the third instant variables. So in this case, we don't do this dot times fish was fed because we don't have a second local variable name that is the same name as fish name. So in this case, you can either use this dot times fish was fed or times fish was fed. They will be the same thing.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty much if I were to write something like times fish was fed, then I'm in trouble because the computer's gonna be like, okay, is it this one or is it this one? But I got rid of it altogether, so I don't have to compare it anymore. There's just that single one. Like if there was a cookie jar on the shelf and your aunt tells you go grab the cookie jar, there's only one, so you don't have to worry about which one you got to pick. You don't ask her which one do I choose. She'll look at you funny. So yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next method. I'm gonna. Does it matter which order? Which one do you think we should start with, Ian? So is it this one
In this
or
case,
this one?
doesn't matter because right now we just use instant variables. So just go ahead and do the assessment method.
Mm-hmm. So wait, you mean this one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just making sure. Okay. So so what's a good name for this method, guys? Oh, what do you think is a good name, Ian?
So for assessor, remember that we're returning something. So after you specify public and private or private, then you would specify what return type you want. So in this case, we're asking for a string. So the next word will be string. And let's say the method name equal fish report. Yeah, fish report.
Okay. So it will be fish report. Okay. Does it take any parameters?
In this case, no. But also remember the string, public string. And then, so remember the keyword for assessor is return, right? So the next line would be something return something.
So yeah, actually, you pretty much covered it. Okay, so it's going to return a line, and it's going to say your fish, and then the fish name goes there, ate blank pellets. You fed him or her blank times today. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'll say your fish plus fish name plus, and I have to be careful here because I have to mind the spacing. So there's no spacing over here, so I'm going to move on to the next one, 8, and then I'll put a space over here as well. And then I have to get the number of pellets, so pellets eaten plus, and there's a space over here, so I have to put another space, pellets. You fed, well, I'm going to move it over here, him slash her space times fish was fed. And then there's a space over here. All right, I'm going to press enter and go down to the next line. That's a very legal statement to do. And I only do that because it's a lot easier than going way off the screen. So I'm just going to do that. So you fed him or her space, the amount of number, and then space again, times today, semicolon.
So in this case, every time you add something, it would just add literally what in the string, and then the variable, string variable. It doesn't give you a space before and after, because a string is different from the variable. And also, every time you return a string, you have to see that your string is green, your variable is black. So if the color is not something like this, your code has something error, and you need to fix it.
So I've seen some students do this. It would put system.out.println, because what it says is, oh, it's returning a string, so it's going to return the words, right? So it's going to print out the words, right? Is this a good idea, Yan?
No. So in this case, it would not be a good idea to do that, because since you specify string fish report, you specify that this is an assessor method. And for every time you have an assessor method, it expects a return something. So if you don't have any return right here, when you try to compile it, it will give you an error. So go ahead and compile your code. So that is your compile error. Can you click on the error to see what it's saying?
Missing return statement.
Yeah. So you cannot do that with assessor method. So you have to remove system out without a friend, but replace that with the return keyword.
Yeah. So just to be clear, guys, returning a string is different from printing out the string itself.
And also notice only one return. You cannot return multiple times. It only accepts and expects one return.
Yeah, so statement. If I put something like return 1, 2, 3, I tried to compile it, it would tell me unreachable statement. That's because as soon as you hit return right here, the method's going to decide, oh, I'm done, because it is done once it returns something. That's what it's mechanically supposed to do. Okay.
So that method is done. Let's move on to mutator method.
All right, so now there's going to be a method that feeds the fish. All right. So public. So guys, what type would this be? So how would a person figure out what type it should be or return type it should be? Yen?
So there's only two kind of methods, right? Assessor and mutator. So if it's assessor, return something as a string. Mutator would be the opposite, returns nothing, but it wants to change. So if this is a mutator, the keyword would be void. So you would do public void feed fish.
And does it need any parameters?
So in this case, it is asking for the number of pellets. So yes, you would need int pellets as your parameter variable.
Yeah. So the prompt says you should feed, or it should feed the fish a number of pellets of your choice. So that means there's power to the user. They can decide how many pellets you can feed. So I'm going to call it pellets, or I'm just going to call it number. I have a reputation of making really long names, but I like doing that. So I'm just going to do that. All right. So I'm going to call it the number of pellets.
Yeah. And in this method, you want to update the number of pellets, right? So you would want to add, because every time you feed the fish, you want to keep count of how many pellets you fed it and how many times you actually feed it.
So I see a student, sorry?
No, you can go.
Okay, so I see a student asking, why do we use void instead of int? So let's take a look at the description here. So there will be a method that feeds the fish. It should feed the fish a number of pellets of your choice. It should keep the class, it should help the class keep track of how many times you fed the fish. And it should also help the class keep track of how many pellets you fed the fish. In this case, do I need to return anything?
In this case, you don't need to return anything because I'm not asking you to return anything. I'm asking you to keep track of the instant variables numbers. So in this case, I'm asking you to keep track of the number of pellets the fish has eaten and the number of times that you feed the fish.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to get how many pellets were eaten or how many times the fish was fed. It's already done in the fish report technically, right? Like it says your fish ate this many pellets and you fed her this many times. I don't need to do it here either. And the purpose of feed fish is to literally feed the fish. I don't expect a number to go back. I expect to feed my fish. And the pellets just go there and then the numbers update. So that's what I'll do. Okay. So how would the math look like here? So it should keep track of how many times you feed the fish, but it should also show how many pellets you fed the fish. So currently, every single fish starts off with 0 pellets. So let's say if I went to fish feeder tester, so I'm going to call my fish fishy. Yeah, I'm just going to call it fishy. And then I'm going to say my fish dot feed fish. Oops. And I'm going to say, like, I want to feed it 7 pellets. So that's what it's going to look like. Because it takes in a number, and it takes in the name, the method. There you go, right? So I'm going to try to feed it 7 pellets. So how to make it go from here with 0 to 7?
So in this case, you would add, right?
Yeah.
And you also want to keep track of every time you feed a fish, the Now keep track of the number that you feed the fish from last time to the number you feed the fish from next time. So you would say something like fish pellets eaten equal pellets eaten plus pellets, number of pellets. So in this case, let's do this in math way. So 0 equals 0 plus 7 from the tester. So here you would get 7, right? And if you have another line, can you do the tester? Fish, my fish, dot feed fish 5.
Did you want me to test it and test the output?
Just type it right now.
Oh, wait, do you mean like this part right here?
No, like the tester.
Oh, like literally test it, right?
Feed fish 7.
Yeah, feed fish 7.
I
It's
mean
right there.
5.
5.
I mean 5.
Oh, okay.
Second line.
Okay, all right. And then
No, the second line, my fish, feed fish.
Oh, whoops, my bad. Okay, so 5. Okay.
Okay, now can you go back to the class?
All right.
So in this case, after you execute that line, that will be 7, right? And if you execute the second line, 7 equals 7 plus 5. So now you would get 12. So that is what's happening right now. Okay.
Yeah, so if I were to get rid of this right here, and I only said number of pellets, it would literally just replace the old number with this new one instead of adding it. So I say I feed fish 7 times, and then I feed it 5 times again. Or sorry, I feed it 7 pellets, then I feed it 5 pellets. It's not going to turn into 12. It's just going to replace the 7 with 5. So that's not good. So I should do this like that.
And then the next line in the method asking you to keep track of the number of times you feed the fish.
So right here, how many times you feed the fish. So not only do I have to update how many pellets it's eaten total, I have to say I fed the fish, so times fish was fed equals, goodness, I'm just going to copy and paste this, plus 1. All right.
So remember that you start from 0 and now you add 1. So every time you feed the fish, it adds 1. If you feed it again, it will add another 1. So that will be 2 and 3 and so on. And you keep feeding the fish. And I think that is it for the class, right, Mark?
Yes, let's test it. So what do I do, guys, if I want to test if this works? So if I wanted to print out this report, what do I say right here in this line?
So you would do system.out.print.
Print. Goodness. Okay. Len. And what goes inside here? Do you guys think? If I wanted to get the report of the fish. So the expected values. How do I get the expected values? So someone said in the chat said the expected values, but how do I extract it from the class? I have a method that does that right here. Yeah, exactly. So I will say my fish dot report, or not report,
Fish report.
Fish report.
So whenever you call a method, remember you have to indicate what object are you calling that method from. So in here, my fish is your object dot method. And the reason why fish report work in this case is because it is a method from the fish feeder. And my fish is the object from fish feeder. So that is why it's working.
So some of you guys might be confused. You're like, why is that compiling? Why isn't he just writing this whole thing in here like this? But what is this returning in the first place? A string, right? And what is that string? Right here. So this is actually like just saying, write this in here. Is just implicit, and therefore I can get away with saying my fish dot. Okay, I keep forgetting the name of the method. All right, fish report. Yeah, there you go.
And also, this is easier if you do it this way. Let's say you have a bunch of systems that are different, and you want to get a report every time, right? That would be it would be really long to copy and paste those chunks lines of code. That you can also just do one time in your actual class, and every time you want to call it, you just do fish report, and you have a whole line all over again.
So let's do the fun part and see if our code actually works. The part that every programmer loves to do. All right, let's see it. All right. So your fishy, and that was the name of my fish, ate 12 pellets, which is 7 plus 5. You fed her 2 times today, and I did. I fed her once over here and another time over here. So we're done. I think the next part is Java docs, right?
Yeah, so let's go ahead and do one for the assessor, one for the mutator first.
Okay. So does everyone remember the notation for Java docs? It is this, and then you press enter.
So the first line, whenever you comment, would be the description. So go ahead and do the description, Mark.
Okay. So this returns a report of the fish's values or values or statistics.
And then the next line, since we don't have any parameter, we would just go ahead and do at return.
At return.
And you want to say what return, right? So return the string of the fish values.
It returns the fish's values.
Yeah, something like that will work. So we are done with that one. Let's go to the mutator one.
Okay.
So this one is a mutator. So but it still follows the same convention for Java commenting. So the first line would always be the description. So go ahead and do the description.
Okay. So this one feeds the fish and updates the values of the fish.
All right. And notice how in this one we have a parameter. So the next line would be add param. And don't forget the number of pellets.
So you have to mention the name of the param you're referring to. And then you say what it does, or what is that for.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I named it so good that I technically wouldn't really need one. And the description would just be the number of pellets. Gee, I wonder what that means. And then you just see it right there.
So that is it for mutator. And let's go back to the constructor. The constructor.
All right, over here.
Yeah. So again, the first line would be description of the constructor. So create a fish
an
object.
instance of a fish.
And then notice we also have param here. So do an add param.
Param. This right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say the name of the fish. Wow, I wonder what fish name is.
You can be as
Go ahead.
Detailed as you want when you specifying your param. It doesn't really matter as long as it's detailed enough for someone else to understand. Yes. So from here, I think we are done with the whole class, including the Java doc. Right?
Let's check. So I'll turn into documentation, and it shows everything that my class does, and it shows the documentation I just wrote. So let's see if it's readable to me. Fish feeder has the fish name. The fish name is the name of the fish. Okay, that makes sense to me. All right, public void feed fish. Feeds the fish and updates the value of the fish. Oh, okay, and number of pellets. All right, cool. And it returns the fish's values here. Oh, okay, great. Easy class. All right.
Next one on our agenda are data types and operations. So the data types we really need to focus on are the as in primitive types would be int and double. So as we have here on the left side, there are also other data type as well, like strings or fish feeder, as what we just did. But right now we're just gonna focus on the primitive types int and double, and we also have some operations and expressions for you to follow along and guess what the expected value should be. And remember, for the lecture, we went over a little bit of casting. So here we also have example of casting on the left. So let's follow what we have on the slide. So here we have int x equals 7 and double y equal x. So Mark, can you tell me what's the expected value you should have for the first one?
Oh boy, I'm gonna get this wrong. Okay, all right. So it is an integer x, and it has 7 right now. And I'm gonna turn it implicitly into a double. So I think it's still gonna be 7. So let's check. Int x equals 7. And then it's gonna be double y equals x. Now let's see what y is. It is 7, but there's now a decimal over here.
So notice how when we assign x to y, we didn't have to cast, right? Because in this case, int is smaller than double. So whatever is int will convert to double. So in this case, you don't need to specify double x. You don't have to for this case.
Yeah. In other words, when Java sees an integer and it sees like 7, and you want it to turn into a double, they're like, oh, that's easy. I just add 0.0 to the end. That's easy. But it's not so true the other way around when I have 8.3 and they say turn that into an integer. And you're like, but now I have to drop 0.3. Now it's just 8. But yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So the next one we have double x equal 5.3. Can you go ahead and type that in?
All right.
You might need to name it something else.
Let's check. Yeah, all right. How do I reset this anyways? Oh, no, that's one out. Okay, whatever. I'll just call it A. Yeah.
Okay. So in this case, int y equal cast int x, it will gives you the value of what? What do you think, Mark?
So, from what I know, it has 5.3, and then I'm going to turn it into an integer. But 5.3 is not an integer, so I'll omit the 0.3 like that, and it'll turn into a 5. So it does what we call truncation. And then let's check if that's true. And that is exactly what it does.
And when you cast a double to an int, you also specifying to the compiler that you're accepting the truncation and you expect the number to decrease and will be lost if there is anything after the decimal point. So in this case, if you want to cast like that, you accept your responsibility in the runtime if there is any error arise. But in the other way, when we had the top example, that is the one where you want a more accurate value, or when you want to increase your value into a larger number in the runtime. So that is that for two examples for changing data types and casting. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to all the operations that we went over during lecture. So let's assume int x equals 5, int y is 7, double z equal 9.8, double w equal 5.3. So go ahead and look at these expressions and try to figure out what are the expected values for all of these. So the first one is x minus y plus z. That is very straightforward. So what should it be?
So let's take a look here. So it's x minus y plus z. So that's like saying, I'm just going to do my work over here. So that's like saying 5 minus 7 plus 9.8. Nothing really interesting here. It's your basic math, and that's I'll just do it here. Plus z. So it's 7.8. Ignore this extra stuff over here. The Blue Jay tool over here. If it's close enough, then that's good enough. Just let's just go with that. But yeah. So let's see. This turns it into -2, and then -2 plus 9.8 is like 9.8 minus 2, so that's 7.8, and we're good.
Okay. Notice that you have int and double in this expression. So if anytime you involve an int and a double value, your result will be a double. But if you have an int and int, your result should always be an int. So go ahead and move on to number 2. So y mod z divided by x. So what is modulo, Mark?
Okay.
What's it supposed to do?
So for modulo, so let's say I have 11 mod 5. That's like saying, what's 11 divided by 5, but give me the remainder instead. So it's equivalent to saying that. So I'm going to divide 11 by 5. And so I could say, oh yeah, 5 times 2 is equal to 10. Subtract 10 to 11. What's left? 1. So that is what is left. So instead of like dividing it all the way and like, oh yeah, so it's going to be 2.2. Oh wait, actually wait, is that even right? Wait, 11 divided by 5. Yeah, 2.2. Okay, all right. where did it go? Okay, here you go. Yeah, so yes, 11 modulo 5 is equal to 1.
So let's go ahead and go over number 2.
Okay, so in that case, let's go over number 2. So I always have a hard time with these. When I see modulo, so I'm used to PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. But as soon as modulo comes in, I'm like, I really don't know where it goes. So in what order does it happen, Yen?
So modulo had the same precedent as division and multiplication, but it is after exponent and parentheses. So every time you see modulo, multiplication, or division in the same line, just go from left to right.
So in the case of modulo, we just treat it the same order of precedence as this. Like pretend it's a sign and then just do a modulo operation instead. So or a multiplication side, sorry. Yeah, but yeah, let's say y divided by z, but give me the remainder instead. So 7 divided by 5.
7 mod 5.
Yeah, sorry. 7 divided yeah, 7 mod 5, then give me the remainder. That's going to give me 2 because 5 goes into 7 one times, and then 7 minus 5 is equal to 2. So I have 2. And then after that, I have to keep track if I have an integer or a double. So it's probably going to stay an integer. That's what I think right now. So I'm gonna go.
Wait, 7 mod 9.8.
Wait. So whoops. Okay. 7. Wait, this is actually really. I can't do this in my head actually.
So that would be 7.
All right, let's do that. So 7 modulo 9.8 is equal to 7.
The reason why it is 7, because let's say you take 7, you divide by 9.8, right? That will give you a 0 point something, right? But you're looking for the remainder. So your remainder from 0 is 7. So that would be 7.
Okay, so what she's saying is, it's like saying 32 divided by 1 million or 2 billion, gazillion, jillion, whatever, right? If you divide it by that, then the remainder is definitely going to be 32 because this number is already bigger than 32. So in this case, this is already bigger than 7, so the remainder is 7. Okay, so it returns 7.
And 7 divided by 5.
And then we'll do 7 divided by 5. So 7's a double, so I should make that a note. And then I'm dividing by an integer, but it doesn't matter because it's a double.
So that would give you 1.4.
Yes. And it does that exactly.
So let's go ahead and move on to number 3. W mod X mod Y. So if we translate that to number, that would be 513 mod 5 mod 7. So
Okay.
we're gonna go ahead and do from left to right. 513 mod 5, that would gives you 0.3. 0.3 mod 7.
So
and that would
yeah, go ahead. Yeah. And
that
that
will
would
give you 0.3 because remember it follows the same thing. If the first number is smaller than the second number when you mod it, it would just return the value of the first number, which is 0.3.
Yeah.
And let's go ahead and move on to the fourth one.
Mhm.
Y divided by X times Z. So in number, that would be 7 divided by 5 times 9.8.
7 divided by 5 times 9.8. Okay. So I'll do 7 divided by 5. And then I multiply 1 by 9.8, which is just 9.8, probably. Right?
Yeah.
Wait,
So
oops.
let's see what the value should be as we talk. So 5, 7, and 5 from the statements, those are ints. So 7 divided by 5 would give you a 1, because int and int should give you an int, right? Yes. So that will give you 1. 1 times a double now, 9.8. So that would give you a 9.8, because now you're doing int and double. So the result should be a double. So go ahead and check that.
Okay, so it's going to be y divided by x times z. It is a double. That is equal to 9.8.
As long as you do double int, it doesn't matter what order, it will give you a double. So if you do double double, still a double. Int, still an int. Double int or int double will give you a double.
So because of the properties of math, it doesn't matter if I say a times b or b times a. It'll give me the same thing. So basically, it's kind of like saying the same thing anyways, you know?
Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead with number 5. So z w times x plus y. So that would be 5.3 times 5 plus 7. So notice how we had double and an int. So the value should be a double, right? And then you add 7. So your number is still gonna be a double. So let's go ahead and calculate that.
5.3 times 5 gives me 26.5.
Okay.
And I say 26.5 plus 7.
So notice how we have a double as a result. So that is all we have for this operation. If you still have any confusion about modulo, just remember it's like the complement of division. And for division, you want the answer, right? You don't care about the remainder. But for the modulo, instead of care about the result, you want to care about the remainder. So just think it that way. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add more?
Yeah, so I think the one thing a lot of people forget, so like a lot of people, by the time they get used to modulo, it's fine. That's easy. The one thing everyone loves to forget is when you're using division integers or integer division. If you say 1 divided by 2, that's actually 0. And if you say 3 divided by 2, that's actually 1. And it drives people crazy. But just always remember, when you're dividing, anytime when you do division, always look if it's 2 integers or if one of them is a double.
Yeah. So if you want a double when you do fraction like that, so can you go ahead and do 1/2 again?
Okay, in here?
Yeah, 1/2.
Okay, so 1 over 2 returns 0.
That will give you 0. But if you want that to be a double, then you have to do 1 over 2.0 or 1.0 over 2. So this will give you a double that you wanted. So remember in this case.
And then here's another thing. Does anyone think this will work?
Your double is supposed to be lowercase.
Oh, okay. So let's see if this actually works. It does.
Yeah. That is another way that you can do.
But does this work? And let's see if it's correct. Yes, people are correct. The chat guessed right. Chat won.
So that is something for you to try. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and comment on Piazza from the follow-up. And I think we are done for today. Do you have anything else to add, Mark?
I think that's about it.